What's going on, Center City Church?
Pew, 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 pew. That's not what I'm supposed to say there, is it? You already know. I petitioned that I would much rather come out and go, pew, 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 pew.
Where is that, like a cat trying to
that's like
make a gun noise?
That's like at the club.
Oh.
Where they go, pew, 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 pew. I wouldn't know that. Pew, pew. I only know that from watching Jersey Shore.
I don't know what's worse, going to a club or admitting that you watch Jersey Shore.
Honestly, you probably just got 5 more people to watch it because you're sorry. Polly D.
So what's going on, Emma? We have a guest, as you have probably already noticed, for our podcast this morning. Pastor Emma, say what's up to the peoples.
What's up, people?
It's awesome.
Nothing. I'm excited to be here. It's my second time on the podcast.
Yeah.
Thank you for letting me be here.
Well, thank you for stepping in.
Is this what this is to you? It's just a step in. I wasn't actually supposed to be here.
This feels scandalous. I don't know if I like the vibe. And I think I technically used that word right just now.
I'm going to ask you the worst questions now.
Well, why don't you start by asking me one of those worst questions?
All right, cool. So this past week, we talked a lot about vultures. We talked a lot about waiting and promises and what we should do when we're waiting and what waiting kind of looks like. But I think that's easy for us to hear, that waiting's going to be hard. Nobody likes waiting. You talked about getting the check, and I was like, oh my gosh, I'm more like him than I think I am, because I so do that. I will be at a restaurant, we will eat, and it's like, I can't control it, it's just who I am. I will inevitably, on my last bite, try to make direct eye contact with the waiter, because I want to get out of there, because I don't want to wait anymore. So that was a fun realization.
I don't think that's a weakness. I think that's a superpower.
Nope. I don't. It annoys. I low-key think it annoys everybody I'm out with. Anyways, that's for another conversation one day. But I would love to know, just nitty-gritty, what would you advise somebody to do when they're waiting? Like, what does that look like? Does that, like, practically?
Yeah, so I'm going to give you, I guess what you would say is easy answers that require they're tough to kind of live out. Yeah. What I mean by that is what we're reminded from Abram's story, and just even in my personal life, in seasons of wait, you constantly need to be reminded of who God is and how he works. And that's tough. Again, it's an easy answer, kind of rolls off the tongue. Oh yeah, I can remember who God is and how he works. But, it's tough when you're a year into something, 2 years into something. One of the waiting seasons of my life and my wife's life was seasons of infertility. That's a big part of our story. You've all heard it before, or maybe you haven't, but in our struggle for infertility, we're talking a decade plus worth of waiting, and it was a constant retuning my heart to this idea that I know the character and person of God, right? I know it because of my time in study. I know it because of my time in prayer. I know it because it's how it's lived out in the testimony of people around me. I know it because of the relationships and how people have showcased love. But I also know how he works. And it's easy for me now to look back at that season of wait and see how God was working. But in the middle of the season, it's tough to see how God was working. And honestly, you just almost have to wake up every day with your heart set on, I know that I'm waiting, but I know who God is, and I know how he works. And sometimes, again, it's being reminded that he's a God of process, and that he's still working, and we're still waiting, but he's still good.
Yeah, that's good. I think a lot of times we can get frustrated in that, or we can hear something like that on a Sunday morning that we know waiting's going to be hard. Again, we hate waiting for the check at the restaurant, but then understanding that waiting is almost a daily choice where you wake up, feet hit the ground, and say, I may have been waiting for 10 years, but I'm still going to believe he's good, and I still believe. So I think that's really important for all of us whether you're about to enter into a waiting season or you're living in a little bit of a promise, but there may be a waiting season on the other side of this, and kind of knowing how we're going to walk through that. Another question that I would love to ask you, and I don't think now it's as hard as I thought it would be, but we talked a lot about chasing vultures.
Yeah.
I kind of want to know, how do you identify what a vulture is?
That's a great word. People who steal life.
That's good. Talk to me a little bit about that.
Yeah,
What's that look like?
So it's not just people. It can also be things. It could be habits. Quite honestly, some of the vultures exist in my head, and it's thoughts that steal life. But anything that's looking to call things dead that are not, I think that's a vulture, right? Like Abram had to do the work of chasing those things away. There are seasons of life where you'll have people come alongside you, specifically in waiting seasons, with all the good intentions of the world. But if what they're saying is speaking death to something that you know God has not called dead. Now, a harder question might be, how do we know when God's calling something dead that I'm still trying to carry around that's alive?
Yeah.
It's maybe another conversation for another podcast, or maybe a Sunday morning. Because there are times where God is saying, I want you to put that thing down, right? But for those things that he hasn't, those things that you know he's faithful and will come through, it's just a season of waiting. I would say you just have to be careful who you allow to speak into your life. And once you identify them, chasing them away doesn't mean you have to be rude or crass or violent. It just means that you don't give them access to that part of your life, which is very important.
I think that's a big, even boundaries question.
Yes.
Like when you're identifying, okay, this might be an area in my life, or this might be a person in my life that may be a vulture. I don't need to be a vulture back at them.
No.
And so remembering to draw those boundaries to create that space and to kind of let it breathe a little bit. So yeah, when I was listening to that this morning, I was like, yeah, we got to know. We got to know how do you chase vultures?
Yeah. So I think one of the things too is, again, because a lot of these vultures exist in our head, I'm reminded of that passage that speaks to taking every thought captive. And it's a spiritual discipline I think we don't talk a lot about. One of my mentors used to always say that our minds kind of work like the dashboard of your car, and every thought passes through that dashboard. You can either choose to ignore it, or you can learn how to catch that thought before it sits and kind of settles and starts bringing that death. So how do I get rid of vultures? I mean, just really depends what we're talking about. If it's people, some of that is just having tough conversations. If it, there's family, I'm a huge believer and proponent of family, but I also believe that those relationships are forever. So we sometimes have to have conversations that people don't like, and it makes people uncomfortable. But I've often had to remind myself that the promise is worth the work.
Yeah, that's good.
And that's really kind of how I've learned to chase off vultures.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thanks for that. I think it might be all my questions.
But I have a question for you.
Oh, okay.
And this is probably you are not prepared for
Is
this.
it a TikTok question?
No. We'll ask that later. I have a question about when in the wait, there is this place where, and some people have experienced this, some haven't, where it goes from frustration and longing to anxiety. And by your own admission earlier, anxiety is something that you've had to learn how to kind of navigate in this season, and just because maybe not a lot of people have had the insight that I've had and been blessed to have in your life. You've dealt with it like a champ. For somebody who hears a message like this and they're in deep seasons of anxiety because the promise hasn't come yet, what would be your word of advice to kind of help them start moving out of the grips of that anxiety?
Yeah, I think the first thing is to identify the lie. I think a lot of anxiety for me can look like it's never going to happen. He's not going to come through. I probably missed it.
Yeah.
It was probably this opportunity over here, and I totally missed it. And I think that's a lot of remembering that that's not what the voice of the Lord sounds like. That sounds a lot like the voice of the enemy, and that's a vulture. So first off, identifying that's not true. That's not what's happening.
That's good.
But then I think a big thing for me, and maybe, I'm a 7, so I'm very much like, let's do it, let's get it now. Like, I hate waiting as well. It's probably the most agonizing thing, and it's probably been the theme of the past few seasons of my life has been waiting. And I think it's understanding Emma his plans are better.
Yeah.
Like Emma, his plans are better, but I want it now. But his plans are better. Even if it doesn't look like how I wanted it to, I have to constantly remind myself, all right, like you could have it the way that you want it. You could have that, but do you understand that if you waited and you took the Lord's, that it would be 10 times better?
That's good.
And so I have to often remind myself, don't jump the gun.
Let me just also add, we have a tendency from time to time when talking about this topic to get a little hyper-spiritual. There is anxieties and mental health issues that I'm just going to tell you, you need to spend the time, energy, and even resources finding people who could help professionally.
Yeah, getting professional help, I think.
Absolutely. Christian counselors, we've said this before, we share this, it's kind of a mantra of our lives. We go to counseling even when everything's right, just maintenance counseling, because when we were in a season of high anxiety, in this promise that we couldn't understand what was going on, we stepped into counseling. It was life-changing, and for a little bit over a decade, we saw a counselor every month, the same week, the same counselor, developed a rapport, and it's been life-giving to us. So if you're maybe in that place of anxiety where things are getting a little dark, please, please, please reach out to some professional help. Here at Center City, we have some counselors we work for, some counselors that we may be able to resource with you. All you have to do is send an email to hello@centercity.church or reach out to any one of our pastors and we can help you find some professional help in the area. But really want to make sure that we drive that truth home, because anxiety is robbing a lot of people right now.
Absolutely.
And it's really cute on a Sunday to say, chase the vultures. And I believe in that, don't get me wrong, but there's some people who need help identifying what those vultures are and professional help with tools to help navigate how to actually deal and cope with anxiety.
Yeah, I would even say it's one of those nitty-gritty steps.
Yes.
It's one of those things that, oh, that sounds really great, but this is a part of walking out the promise, is walking through everything and dealing with it.
So this Sunday, we kind of step into what happens when, in the waiting season, you make the wrong choice. So you don't want to miss it. It's a story of our ability to fail, our humanity, but also a story of God's grace to restore. So you don't want to miss this Sunday. I can't wait to hang out with you guys and kind of walk through the Word again together. Emma did such a good job stepping in high-fivers.
Oh, thanks.
She's killing it.
What if they want me on here?
Then you and Ashley can do it, and I'll just cheer it on from the back. If that's what you want, just comment in the comment section.
Please don't.
Emma for 2022, and we'll make the change. That'd be awesome. We love you guys. We can't wait to see you this Sunday.